This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. I am delighted to have you. I've got exciting news for you. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, is going to join us at the gathering, as is the Governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt. We've got a great lineup of governors, senators, congressmen, and other thought leaders on the right. If you text the word engage to 33777, you can get a ticket. Or if you go to ericerickson.com, that's the show website. Go to ericerickson.com. You'll see the button. You can click to go order a ticket for the gathering. And time's running out to get your hotel discount as well. So you're going to want to be there. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, is going to join us. So text engage to 33777 to get your ticket, or go to ericerickson.com or ewerickson.com, whichever one. It'll direct you to the same place. You can see the button, get your ticket for this year's gathering. It is coming up in August. You're going to want to be there. Now, the Supreme Court has decided. There's a website called, Midas, something like that, Midas Media something, and it's a left-wing website. And it is breaking the news that the United States Supreme Court has decided to get rid of the Chevron doctrine in the Looper-Bright case. It's not actually so. You need to understand that the case hasn't come out, but they were so ready to expect it today. This left-wing website literally wrote the story and the headline. And it already said it was a 6-3 decision, and the progressives combated this overreach of authority. They said all the right stuff. I mean, they've already got the story written, and the case hasn't come out. But some cases did, one of which I'm very surprised with. But let me review the cases for you. One is Moyle versus United States. That's per curiam decision. The Supreme Court essentially saying that this abortion law in Idaho that prohibits abortions at hospitals in the state, that they're punting the case because the federal government said that Iowa's law was fine, except they needed to perform abortions for mental health care. Iowa fought on that, and then the feds said, actually, mental health care doesn't apply under the law. And the Supreme Court says, well, why are you here? Go back. Ohio versus EPA is a case where the EPA approved some plans by states for air pollution and then walked back the approval when Biden got in office. And the majority of the court says, nope, you can't do this to these states. The states were required to drop implementation plans for how air pollution would transmit from their state across borders into other states. And the EPA dragged its feet. And a federal court said that the EPA could impose its will on states, and the Supreme Court said, not so fast. Amy Coney Barrett, interestingly enough, was in the minority on this case, did not side with the conservatives. Then there's the Harrington versus Purdue Pharma case. Now, you would think with the radicalization as you hear it from the media about the Supreme Court that you'd have the conservatives on one side, the liberals on the other. This was a very interesting case, the way it was decided, and you probably wouldn't know it from the hysteria of the left and how they did this, but let me give you the breakdown here in the case because it actually was an interesting breakdown. Justice Gorsuch wrote the majority and was joined by Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Amy Coney Barrett, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. Brett Kavanaugh wrote the dissent with John Roberts, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan in the minority. Fascinating breakdown. This case involves the Purdue Pharma opioid case and the Sackler family. The Sackler family was in charge of Purdue Pharma, and Purdue filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The Sackler family proposed to return $4.3 billion to Purdue's bankruptcy estate, to the company bankruptcy estate. In exchange, the Sacklers wanted a judicial order releasing the family from all opioid-related claims and enjoining victims from bringing such claims against them in the future. Essentially, the Sackler family said, look, we'll give back to our company $4.3 billion we took from our company. In exchange, we don't want to be sued over any of the opioid cases. The bankruptcy court approved the reorganization, including the plan. But a district court, a federal district court, vacated it, saying that nothing in the law authorizes bankruptcy courts to extinguish claims against third parties like the Sackler family without consent from others. This was reversed on appeal and it's gone to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said in this wild decision where you had liberals and conservatives joining each other on opposite sides saying, wait a second, no. The bankruptcy code doesn't allow a family to avoid litigation against its family when that family is not involved in lawsuit. The bankruptcy code does not authorize a release that, as part of a plan of reorganization under Chapter 11, discharges claims against a non-debtor without the consent of the affected claimants. In other words, in bankruptcy court, all of the creditors are involved. And because all the creditors are involved, they get to shape the bankruptcy case for the debtor. The Sackler family wasn't filing bankruptcy. The company was filing bankruptcy to allow the Sackler family to escape liability for its personal decisions related to opioids through Purdue Pharma, and to have the bankruptcy court discharge its debts is something the bankruptcy code doesn't contemplate. Now, the minority notes, with Brett Kavanaugh writing, that essentially this bankruptcy could not have happened and the company could not have reorganized without the Sackler family divesting its personal funds and giving it back to the company. Therefore, to protect creditors and et cetera, the Sackler family should be able to get away with this. It's a very technical issue for some very unlovable people. And the majority of the court said, nope, the Sacklers can be sued. They caused this mess and they're not a part of it. Now, the big case is Jarchezi. I'm actually really shocked that the left, which, the left was upset with the waterboarding at Guantanamo Bay. They were worried about the civil rights of terrorists. They were worried about the detention trials at Guantanamo Bay. They wanted lawyers at law firms to go represent the terrorists. They were deeply worried about terrorists who were not American citizens. But the left seems to think if you're an American citizen, your rights under the Constitution are frivolous. Here's the case. Between 2007 and 2010, Jarchezi, one of the defendants, and a group called Patriot 28 launched investment funds ranging from $24 million for 120 accredited investors and high net worth individuals to more. Patriot 28 served as the fund's investment advisor. Jarchezi and Patriot 28, a company, misled investors in three ways. They misrepresented the investment strategy. They lied about the identity of the auditors and prime broker, and they inflated the fund's value so that Jarchezi and Patriot 28 could collect large management fees. The Securities and Exchange Commission began investigating. and found that there was a lot of fraud. They decided to, under the Dodd-Frank Act, handle it in-house. And they found Jarchezi and Patriot 28 were handled themselves fraudulently, and they had to divest a lot of money. Jarchezi and Patriot 28, they sued. And the argument was pretty straightforward, actually. What their argument was that the SEC is part of the executive branch of the federal government. And because it's part of the executive branch of the federal government, it can prosecute, but it shouldn't serve as judge and jury in a prosecution, that there's a separation of powers issue. And the SEC fought and said, well, this is how Congress set it up. It should have been 9-0. The Supreme Court held that when the Securities and Exchange Commission seeks civil penalties against a defendant for securities fraud, the Seventh Amendment, which gives defendants a right to a jury trial, applies in these sorts of cases. Now, this is from the majority. A defendant facing a fraud suit has the right to be tried by a jury of his peers before a neutral adjudicator. Rather than recognize that right, the dissent would permit Congress to concentrate the roles of prosecutor, judge, and jury in the hands of the executive branch. This is the very opposite of the separation of powers that the Constitution demands. Jarchezi and Patriot 28 are entitled to a jury trial in an Article III court. Outside of limited areas, we have no license to deprive the American people of their constitutional right to an independent judge, to a jury of their peers, or to the procedural protections at trial that due process normally demands, let alone do whatever the government wishes to dispense with them. People like Mr. Jarchezi may be unpopular, perhaps even rightly so. The acts he allegedly committed may warrant serious sanction, but that should not obscure what is at stake in his case and others like it. While incursions on old rights may begin in cases against the unpopular, they rarely end there. The authority the government seeks and the dissent would award in this case is to penalize citizens without a jury, without an independent judge, and under procedures foreign to our court system, certainly containing no such limits. This is why the Constitution built high walls and clear distinctions to safeguard individual liberty. Ones that ensure even the least popular among us has an independent judge and jury of his peers. So here's the setup in this case. These guys did bad things. If the allegations are taken on their face, then they were found guilty by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But the Securities and Exchange Commission had in-house lawyers and an in-house judge decide the case. And they found that this group acted fraudulently, and they forced them to give up money. We have a long-standing tradition in this country that when the government comes to confiscate your life, liberty, or property, you get to go before a judge. And the SEC denied this person the right. And the Supreme Court majority is saying, no. If the government is coming for your life, liberty, or property, you get an Article III hearing before an independent federal court with a jury of your peers under the Constitution. It's mind-numbing to me that this isn't a 9-0 decision. In fact, Sonia Sotomayor, the dimwit dissenting justice, actually said it's a violation of the separation of powers that this Supreme Court would not allow the executive branch to act as judge, juror, and executioner altogether. That was her argument, that when Congress says that the judicial power can go to the executive, that the courts have to let it go alone. No, we've got checks and balances in our system of government. I can't believe that the left, which gets so worked up about the civil rights of terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, thinks that the dissent got it right in this case. It's a violation of separation of powers. None of you should want what the minority wanted. All of you should be thankful that the Supreme Court said the Seventh Amendment applies. The Associated Press, carrying water for the left, actually had a tweet that the Supreme Court rules against significant enforcement powers of the SEC that could put future cases in doubt against defendants or some such. No, the Supreme Court ruled the Constitution applies, and the Seventh Amendment right to a jury applies to bad guys too. It's mind-numbing that people want to defend the minority position in this. It shows you how transactional some people are. The Supreme Court got this case right today. They got it right. Now, it sounds like they may continue over to next week. There are still significant cases to come from the court, and usually they wrap up by the last day of June. Next week spills over into July. They haven't done that before, but it looks like they just might. We're going to get some really big cases in the next few days, and sadly, we didn't get the Trump immunity case before the debate tonight, which I honestly didn't expect to happen given when it was argued, but if it doesn't come tomorrow, it's going to spill over into next week. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Big day at the Supreme Court, though, and they got the cases right.
Hey, it's Emma Chamberlain. I designed these new glasses for Warby Parker, and I basically can't take them off. Like, I'm showering in them and sleeping in them. They're just that good. Go see them all at warbyparker.com. And you know what? Have a good day, too. Okay? All right? Bye.
A great many people on the right seem to be flummoxed by Amy Coney Barrett. So Barrett did not want to go with a clear conservative majority on the Idaho abortion case, although it became a per curiam decision, and she wrote a concurrence in it on why she wanted to send the case back. Amy Coney Barrett, of course, in the majority on the social media case, did not grant free speech rights. You got a lot of people questioning Barrett right now. I've read the cases. I've read her concurrences and dissents. And I have a theory. Amy Coney Barrett is not on your agenda. She wants to get it right and believes timeliness matters. If you listen to her dissents or her writings in majority cases, timeliness is an issue for her. I get the sense she feels like the conservative bloc, particularly Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, are rushing too fast. And that in rushing so fast, they risk setting precedents the left will turn and use themselves later. And she's very interested in timeliness. Now, you can say she's a coward. My friend Josh Hammer says she's timid. Well, you can call her whatever you want. She's got life tenure on the Supreme Court now. And the point is that conservatives need to be mindful of the fact that every single time Amy Coney Barrett breaks from the conservative majority, it's because she has a sense that the case has been rushed. We see this in the in the case about social media companies and the censorship by the government. We see it pretty clearly there that she actually thinks there's no future harm. They didn't bring in the social media companies. They made a mistake, I think, not bringing in the social media companies into the case. We see it in the EPA case that came out today, that she's in the minority, and it's all about timeliness, that they moved too fast on this. It should have been played out. And we see it in her opposition to a clear lines in the Idaho abortion case, that she thinks because everybody was changing their mind all the way up to the Supreme Court, they should have never gotten to the court until both sides had fleshed out their arguments. It's not that she's not conservative. It's that she thinks the conservatives might be rushing too fast and opening themselves up to traps later. Now, some of you rush very quickly to try to figure out your tech needs, and you stumble into making bad decisions. Don't make a bad decision. Make the great decision to call Vision Computers at 404-COMPUTE. You can call them and let them take their time with you to talk to you about what you actually need and what you want. A lot of people go buy the one-size-fits-all computer, and it doesn't actually do everything they want. Vision can build you what you want and save you money, and then they give you the world-class tech support. Now, if you call them at 404-COMPUTE and you don't need a computer from them, but you need tech help, they can do that as well. For the low annual fee of $179, they can help you. So if you don't know how to store a file or where to find a file, or you got email problems or printer problems, they can answer your questions 15 seconds or less, faster than a Google search. You'll get your answers. They can do it for your home or your office. So if your small business doesn't have an in-house IT guy, Vision can serve that role. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. You're going to save even more money. Call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com. Anybody nationwide can take advantage of this. Yes, we'll get into the debate, and I will take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program today, the phone lines are open. I guess I should open the call screening program, shouldn't I? Nonetheless, before I can take your phone calls, I got to talk to you about the raw politics of the day because, well, we're reaching the point of desperation. As every single one of you listening knows, regardless of your faith, your politics, your predisposition, your support of various candidates, every single one of you listening knows the left, whether you're on it or on the other side of it, the left hates Fox News. Every single one of you knows the left hates Fox News. And yet we've reached the bizarre moment of campaign 2024 where the left is curled up in the fetal position, clinging desperately to the Fox News poll, saying, "Help me, Fox News. You're my only hope," because the polling, a month after the verdict in the Trump trial, has shifted dramatically toward Donald Trump. It's remarkable. And the Supreme Court did not give the Biden team an abortion win at the Supreme Court. In fact, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously against states trying to ban the abortifacient drug, and also ruled largely unanimously that Idaho still has to perform emergency room abortions under federal law. Here's Chuck Todd on MSNBC.
There is a debate tomorrow where abortion is a huge issue in this country, and particularly for the Biden White House.
Well, in raw political terms, Chris, there are folks in the Biden campaign that were hoping for a different decision out of Idaho, right? They would never say it on the record because it puts people's lives at risk. But there was certainly, it certainly makes the case they want to make a lot cleaner and easier when it comes to judges and that issue. So,
yeah, the Biden administration didn't get what they wanted from the Supreme Court, and now they're running into, I mean, just listen to this. This is a roundtable discussion on NBC with a Detroit voter.
Who did you vote for in 2020? I voted for Biden. You regret that? In some ways, I do.
In some ways, I do regret voting for Joe Biden. This is where we are, but it gets worse. Larry Kudlow had on Jim Jordan on Fox Business. Listen to this about Washington Post polling.
Well, I got a great headline for you. I'm sure you saw it. Washington Post poll. Donald Trump stronger than Joe Biden on protecting democracy by 44 to 38%. No, 44 to 33% is what this is. So now that's very interesting because Mr. Biden says he's going to run on democracy. We're going to talk about January 6th and this and that. But, oh, wait a minute. Mr. Biden tried to keep Trump off the ballot in a couple of states. Mr. Biden, his lawfare doesn't seem to be working.
You know, the Democrats should pay attention when the Washington Post does this, except here's what the Democrats are doing. They're all outliers. They're all outliers. They're all outliers. They're all outliers. An outlier is a poll that deviates from all the other polls. And it's beginning to look like the Fox News poll might be the outlier. Let me give you the state of play. Emerson, Trump up 1. Yahoo News, Biden up 2. Daily Kos, which is a left-wing pollster, tied race. Reuters, Ipsos, Trump up 2. NPR, tied race. Fox News, Trump up 2. CBS News, Trump up 1. Morning Consult, tie. Quinnipiac, Trump up 4. And now the New York Times, CNN, the most accurate pollster of 2022. Trump up 4. You can say the polling is wrong, and I get it. Some of you email all the time, and you get mad at me for talking about the polling. The polling's not news. But actually, it is news. It is news. The polling is news because it shapes the coverage of the race. You may not like that news organizations do polling, and you may not like that it shapes the coverage of the race, but it does, and you can't deny it. And also, when all of the polling charts in the same direction, that's a news story. Quinnipiac is known to have a Democrat bias. As I mentioned yesterday when the Quinnipiac poll came out, Democrats and Republicans alike perceive the Quinnipiac poll to have a 2 to 3 point bias towards the Democrats. It's always had it. It's the way they model it. Everyone knows when you get the Quinnipiac poll, add 2 points to the Republican side. And it's got Trump up 4. So it could be Trump up 6, which if you dive down into the New York Times poll, Quinnipiac is of registered voters, and it has Trump up 4. Among likely voters in the New York Times, it's got Trump up 4, but among registered voters, the New York Times has Trump up 6. Where the Quinnipiac poll would be if you gave Trump bias, it gave Trump 2 more points because of bias towards the Democrats. Now, what's so notable about this is you've got Nate Cohen out there now. He's the polling analyst for the New York Times. Trump's up 3 among likely voters. Trump's up 6 among registered voters. In the new polling, he says, Real Clear Politics has it as up 4. He says up 3. But here's the thing. Nate Cohen is having to call his poll an outlier. Why? Because the left is wrapping itself in the Fox News poll. The Fox News poll is one of only 2 polls that shows Biden with a lead. Even the left-wing Daily Kos has Donald Trump in the lead. So the left is, help me, Fox News, you're my only hope. And Nate Cohen's got to write a piece that says, yeah, our poll could be an outlier. About every 20th poll that a pollster conducts lies outside the field. Why? Because you're using random samples. Every single pollster gets an outlier. An outlier, they're difficult, but they're inevitable. Let me just read you for this. Historically, outliers are less accurate when judged against final election results, but they spark a media frenzy as well. When outlier results come around, it's better to look at the average of polls. As it happens, we released our poll average on Monday, and Mr. Trump is ahead by 1 over Joe Biden in the poll average. Outliers are bound to happen. Just as you can flip a coin heads 5 or 6 times in a row simply by chance, you can survey 1,200 people and end up with 30 more Trump voters than you'd get over the longer run simply by chance. That kind of error is inevitable. It happens once every 20 times in polling, and coincidentally, this is our 20th poll of the election year. But there's a reason for that. Typically, it's Democrats who want to talk to the pollster more than Republicans. But after Donald Trump's conviction in New York, Republicans became 17% likelier to respond to the survey. It's actually the first time in the New York Times seeing a poll that Republicans were more likely to respond than Democrats. Democrats want everyone to know they hate the SOB. After the Trump verdict, Republicans want to talk to every pollster and say, I'm still with that SOB. The verdict did not fire up the left. The conviction of Donald Trump in New York City by a partisan Democratic judge and a partisan Democratic prosecutor fired up the Republican base and a handful of independents for Donald Trump. But there's something else. There's something else. I got to read this for you. Nate Cohen has the audacity to write this. Sometimes outliers are right. Yes, outliers are less likely to be accurate. Yes, they might simply be off by chance, but they might also reflect a new shift in the race that other pollsters haven't reported yet. They might reflect something novel and correct about a survey's methodology, and the average of other polls might not be as trustworthy as it looks. What if other pollsters found something surprising as well, but then made tweaks to bring the results into line with the consensus? That's called herding. What if other pollsters with similar results just didn't publish their results? It's happened before. And while outliers are less likely to be accurate, the most valuable poll of all is the outlier that's right. Looking back, the Times Siena poll has a record of publishing outliers that prove to be accurate. When a final Times Siena poll differs from the average of other polls by at least 4 points, the Times Siena poll has actually beaten the average of the rest in 8 of 9 outliers. That doesn't include the Kansas survey he had written about earlier because there were no other public polls in the race. But in the Kansas survey, the New York Times was perceived as having an outlier race that showed a Democrat winning by 12 points in a district Joe Biden had run by 4 points. Everybody dismissed the New York Times poll, and the woman wound up winning by 10 points. In other words, when the New York Times, seeing a poll, has an outlier, everyone should pay attention. And it has freaked out the left. The talking point from the Democrats isn't changing. This is Biden's campaign spokesman with Dana Perino on Fox News.
Well, no, listen, I think what the state of polling speaks to is the fact that this is going to be an incredibly close and competitive presidential election, the way that all modern presidential elections are, right? We know 2016 was incredibly close. 2020 was incredibly close. This is going to come down to tens of thousands of votes in a handful of states. And so that's why tonight is an opportunity for President Biden to communicate directly to those voters that are going to decide this election. And tonight he's going to present a clear choice between himself, who's fighting for the American people every single day, and he's going to be debating against Donald Trump, who's now running his campaign as a convicted felon who's fighting for himself. That's going to be the fundamental choice that we present on the debate stage tonight.
You're going to make it all about he's a convicted felon. Donald Trump's going to make it about illegal immigration and inflation. What do you think is going to be more persuasive to people? We have the polling. We know where it stands on the issue of the convicted felon charge. We have the polling. We know where it stands on inflation. We know where it stands on immigration, and those outweigh the convicted felon charge. It's remarkable that the Biden administration has hammered out their case. The theory of the race is that democracy's under attack and Donald Trump's a convicted felon and no one is buying it. And you've got multiple media profiles now telling the Biden administration you need to change, you need to change, you need to change, you need to change, you need to change. And the Biden administration is digging in their heels saying, no, he's a convicted felon and a threat to democracy. That's our message. Oh, by the way, we're talking about the economy. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the economy. But he's a convicted felon. You're not talking about the economy. You're talking down to people on the economy. This isn't playing well. So now, here's the punchline of all of this for you. The odds. Former DeSantis campaign pollster Ryan Tyson has a bunch of swing state polling showing not only is President Trump still edging out Joe Biden on the ballot in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin, he's expanded his lead in 4 of those 5 states. And the odds makers, The Economist, now gives Trump a 71% chance of winning. Nate Silver gives Trump a 66% chance of winning. Jack Kirschling, a pollster, gives Donald Trump a 64% chance of winning. Decision Desk HQ gives Trump a 56% chance of winning. 538, Nate Silver's old shop, gives it a 50-50 chance of winning. And then Poly Markets, where you can bet on the markets, and people do, Trump has a 60% chance of winning. What's so notable is that many of these, including The Economist and Nate Silver, they give Donald Trump the odds of winning the majority of the popular vote as well. Something a Republican hasn't done since 2004. The Democrats have made a fundamental mistake in this race. They let Joe Biden convince himself to have a second term, and then they let him muddle through convincing himself democracy's under attack is the winning message. Joe Biden is a man who has been wrong about everything for 50 years, and everyone knows it. To think he could be right about this defies the odds, and the odds are now playing in Donald Trump's favor as a result. The markets, however, the financial system is not playing in your odds. We got 22-year high interest rates. People are worried. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years, and they've been warning people about a secret war on cash for some time. If you're interested in safeguarding your hard-earned cash from the secret war, I got a way for you to get this free report from them. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They can educate you on protecting your assets in their free report, Secret War on Cash. You can actually watch what they're talking about on YouTube, the Secret War on Cash. You go to SwissAmerica.com/YouTube. You can get their YouTube page, SwissAmerica.com/YouTube. Then you can get their printed report. I got it. It takes about 15 minutes to read. It's very in-depth, substantive, but easy to understand. And you can save your retirement, your finances by reading it. Get your free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. The All-Out War on Cash, it's growing daily, so read The Secret War on Cash. Just mention my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Greetings, friends. It's Eric Erickson. The phone number is 877-973-7425. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are in the United States of America, First Liberty can help your business grow. If you need an equipment loan, you need trucks or heavy equipment or machinery, and you got great credit, they can move real quick on these. If you're buying a building, buying a franchise, buying a business partner or competitor, they can move on those as well. FirstLibertyGA.com. Get their contact info. Spend 10 minutes with them. FirstLibertyGA.com. They are good people, and they can help any business nationwide. Y'all, prayers requested, I suppose. You know, my wife is training for her next strongman competition at the end of July. She was lifting weights at the gym this morning, and a weight fell off something and landed on her foot. She texted me. She's gotten the x-ray. Her big toe and her middle toe and possibly the toe in between are broken. So they put her in a boot. Said it'll heal. That's the good side. A chip bone, things will heal. But, she never had broken bones growing up, and then she had her Chevy Chase moment in the snow on a cookie sheet where she slid across. This was in Snowpocalypse 2014 here in Georgia. She went down a hill with my son, who at the time was tiny, cheering her on, and went across, hit the cul-de-sac. It was a sheet of ice. She jumped the driveway, went down the hill in the neighbor's driveway. It wound up cracking her tailbone. One time she went outside thinking our son was getting hurt somewhere, and fell and broke a rib, and now she's got her toes broken from going to the gym to train for the strongman competition. It is, my wife is a daredevil. She's always been a daredevil, but keep her in your prayers as her toes are now going to have to heal. I don't know if this is going to mess up her competition. I assume it might. I don't know, but I'm sure she'll be a little disappointed if it does. In any event, when we come back, my wife has been a barrel of laughs this morning as well. She called me a little while ago before the show started, and she said, Johnny marked us safe from the devil down here in Georgia with his fiddle, and yet we've got these two blankety blanks coming to Georgia to mess everything up for our traffic tonight. My wife is not thrilled having two presidents and an Olympic team in Georgia messing up our traffic, but we will talk about the great debate. It might be the most important one we've seen in our lifetimes when we come back.